Manever I say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there, o see them yopo.
Memo bibiara kwaba eba PENDREAM TV. So now your first time or subscribe to channel and click the notification bell and also like Jumadi na share ma afo fronso ensa enkebi. Sammy Gyamfi ede ensembi atudwa a me pesa obeka me ho na yakotie ensema Sammy Gyamfi eka. PENDREAM TV ewo another platform I friend no PENDREAM forum ehono yaje wadwentre either video or audio and wait my record whatever you want to talk about, any trending issues, and I say any issue be we feel say it is worth talking about. We will record a video and I say an audio of yourself. No one send your number ya eda screen so no you be publish ama sign so at wonka number ni 0277128777. Mami sign see number na be number ni 0277128777.
How have we turned the corner relative to inflation? I was talking about lending rate few minutes ago. The monetary policy rate, which is the rate at which the central bank lends to commercial bank, today is 30%. Do you know what it was last year? It was around 22%. Last year, the monetary policy rate was around 20. It came down after the debt restructure. It came down all the way to around 22%. Now it has come up, went to 25, 27. Now it is 30%. So the banks are lending 35, 36%. Which business can survive under this hostile business climate? Which business can survive? Already, Guta, all businesses are complaining about high tax payments. They can't cope. We are paying baller tax. We are paying COVID levy. We are paying all these things. Government is not ready to scrap these nuisance taxes. All the many import levies that Abuso Kai's papers dealers were expecting that government was going to scrap in this media budget review, we are still going to pay because the government didn't do anything about it. Very insensitive. And to add insult to injury, they look us in the face and say, oh, we are recovering. We have turned the corner. The only corner they have turned is their bedrooms, which has become banks for stashing stolen public funds. That is the only corner they have. They have turned.
Stay with the budget.
Then, Doc, look at the state of our central bank today.
Are we discussing central bank?
But is that not part of the economy?
No, we were discussing the review. The budget.
But is that not part of the media budget review? Or you've not read it? You must have stopped making a mockery of yourself, my brother. How can you say we should discuss a budget statement without talking about the health of the regulator of the banking sector, the Bank of Ghana? So then the Bank of Ghana is bankrupt.
The Bank of Ghana,
please.
We are talking about the Bank of Ghana
which today is bankrupt. The Bank of Ghana today has become insolvent. The Bank of Ghana today has declared losses to the tune of 60.8 billion, unprecedented in the history of the central bank. The Bank of Ghana today has declared negative equity of 55 to 70 billion. Why? Because the Bank of Ghana chose to pander to the whims and caprices of this reckless Akufo-Addo Bawumia government by continuously printing money illegally for this government. When we know what the Bank of Ghana Act says, Section 30, as amended by Section 16 of the new Bank of Ghana Amendment Act says, you can't, yes, you are the banker of government. When government goes into crisis, Bank of Ghana can advance overdrafts, short-term loans to the government. You can print money for government. But the law says, don't do more than 5%. Don't give the government more than 5% of the total revenue of the previous year. In 2020, the total revenue was 55 billion cedis. 5% of that was 2.8 billion. Yet, in 2021, Bank of Ghana printed 35 billion cedis for government, according to what remains on the books of Bank of Ghana. In 2021, total revenue, 76 billion. The 5% of that was 3.8 billion. Meaning that if Bank of Ghana wanted to give government an overdraft, it shouldn't have exceeded 3.8 billion. They printed more than 10 times that amount, 45 billion. And the law says that anytime the Bank of Ghana is exceeding 5%, The Bank of Ghana, you don't have the governor, you don't have the power to do that. You must go to Parliament and tell the people's representatives that government is exceeding the 5% of the total revenue of the previous fiscal year they are entitled to. And so tell us what to do. Yet these criminally minded people who have no respect for the law decided to continue to print money. Today they printed over 80 billion and government says we can't pay. Then the same people have gone to sit down and say, okay, the money you printed for us, Doc, listen to it too. 80 billion is like 8 quadrillion old Ghana cedis. The money you printed for us. Now it has become bad debt we can't pay. So write off 50% of it as bad debt. And the Bank of Ghana, without parliamentary approval, writes off 50% of it as bad debt. In which country can this happen? And then instead of them to be resigning, instead of them to be explaining to us why they have violated the law, they have the effrontery to issue press releases and say, oh, we are not alone. Other countries too have been in the same position. Really? All the countries they cited are industrialized countries. And none of the countries they have cited have actually breached their Bank of Ghana Act. What those countries have done are allowed by their laws. You understand? And that printing of money is what has led to the hyperinflation we are talking about here.
No.
You don't understand basic economics.
I mean,
basic economics. You understand that when you have more money chasing fewer goods, it leads to it spikes inflation. You don't know.
No.
But the Bank of Ghana itself and the World Bank, when you read the IMF document, it says that the main reason for the hyperinflation is the continuous printing of what is called signalage, printing of money, which the Bank of Ghana continue to dump in the economy.
No, signalage is not the same thing you are talking about.
What is signalage?
Is different.
What is signalage?
Is like an American dollar. The benefits the currency America gets from the global utilization of the currency.
Massa, don't make a mockery
of
yourself.
Carry on.
There's a very serious platform.
Carry on.
Don't expose yourself on
anyway,
this.
Are you done?
Signalage refers to the printing of money.
No,
go and check that.
No, please.
You understand?
People
so this is what you have done. Then,
please.
Doc. Yes, it is true that we are suffering from economic bankruptcy, and that government has not turned the corner. You know, things are getting worse. The freeze on employment has not been removed. Contractors are not being paid.
So
local contractors are owed
about
15 billion. Government projected to pay them by mid-year 5.5 billion. Government has only paid them 1.5 billion. So already there is a lot of hardships. No corner has been turned, except the bedrooms of these appointees like Cecilia Dapa and Nuhu Hamida, who have become so rich because of the wealth they have amassed in a short space of time in government. You know, but the issue here...
Sammy, that's an allegation without basis.
Oh.
Yes.
Why?
Against the two persons, it's without basis.
Why?
Kindly withdraw that. It's without basis.
Doc.
Kindly withdraw that.
Which part?
The fact that they have amassed wealth in government. Kindly withdraw
Doc.
that. There is no evidence to support that.
Okay. Let me at least give you my basis. Let me give you my basis.
No, don't give me that.
No. Oh, Doc. But it's only fair to... it's only fair to listen to my basis. Why? You have Cecilia Abnadapa, who has reported to the police that house helps in her house have made away with $1 million, 300,000 euros, 350,000 Ghana cedis, jewelry worth $95,000.
We know all that.
So on.
We know all that. Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
And the documents before the course of this country clearly suggest that is, according to the report he made to the police, his property, her property.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
And this is a public officer.
It's still not...
Have you checked the assets she has declared?
I haven't.
Have you checked?
I'm saying that what you have said is still not evidence that the person has acquired...
but what does it show?
No.
Why did she resign?
Sammy,
if you want me to withdraw, I will withdraw. But Doc, the fact still remains that Cecilia Abnadapa, until recently, was the Minister for Sanitation.
True.
A public officer.
True.
Therefore subject to accountability and scrutiny. And this public officer has reported to the police that these huge sums of monies, which she could not have earned legitimately from her salary as Minister of State, has been stolen from her. Because if you put together all her allowances and salaries, you can't get that figure. You can't get that figure. And she is not allowed per the laws of this country to engage in any private work of profits. without the permission of the Speaker of Parliament, and she has no such thing. She has not. No, we are talking about ministers of states. That is the provision, the constitutional requirement. So, if you don't want me to say that, the facts are clear for every discerning mind to discern what that is. So, and you also have another presidential
I'm just reminding you that you're a lawyer.
No, but precisely the reason why I'm a lawyer is why I'm saying that. That's what it is.
No, it's why you shouldn't say that.
Why? It's basically why we should say that. And then you have this presidential staffer who is also complaining of another that some people associated with her, Hamida Nuhu, senior presidential staffer, have stolen $100,000 of money belonging to her and so on and so forth. These are serious matters that should concern every well-meaning Ghanaian. But the point is, where I'm driving at, you see,
to the budget.
Is that, Doc, the excuses our brothers in the NPP continue to make for the economic catastrophe we have on our hands and the hardships we are going through are totally unacceptable. They are disgusting, and they must stop and desist from that. Look, nobody is saying that COVID, Russia-Ukraine war has not affected Ghana. Nobody is saying that, and nobody can say that. COVID is an exogenous factor, a global factor, which has affected all the nations of the world. But it has affected different countries differently. It has brought some countries on their knees. In other words, it has given some countries fever, but it has put some countries in coma. For other countries, it has even killed them completely. Now, the difference in the impact of these external factors on different countries is based on three things. Number one, whether those countries had strong economies before COVID struck them. You understand? Whether they had the buffers to withstand headwinds before COVID struck them. Number two, how COVID was managed. And number three, how the economy was managed in the midst of COVID. So you realize that if you pick something like inflation, yes, COVID has affected all the countries in Africa. But how come that Ghana has the worst inflation figure, third worst inflation figure, in fact, the worst in the whole of West Africa, and the third worst in the whole of Africa, out of 54 countries? Why is it that inflation in some African countries is hovering around 5%, 6%, 7%, 8%, 3%, despite suffering from COVID? But we are recording inflation of 42.5%. How come that none of these African countries have debt obligations? How come none of these African countries, like Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, which Bawumia is because, number one, their economies were stronger than Ghana before COVID struck. And that is supported by the facts. Before COVID struck, our debt to GDP had increased from 56% under President Mahama in 2016 to 63% in 2019. There was no COVID. If you added hidden debts of Esla, Dachi, and the rest, the debt to GDP had hit 70% before COVID struck. Again, before COVID struck, the deficits, which we recorded 6.1% in 2016, that they said were reckless in spending on the 2016 election. That is why deficit was 6.1% of GDP. And passed a law that they will never exceed 5%. They were going to be responsible and live within their means and spend what they have. Before COVID, the deficit for 2019 was 7.5%, meaning that we're already being reckless and living out of our means.
Be able to accommodate.
All right.
And we have been accommodating that when it comes late, senior.
All right. Okay. So let me bring in Sammy.
So I think you get the picture. And therefore, when Sammy comes in, I know he's going to be doing all the things they do. Oppose, refuse to accept reality. And therefore, that's the context I think Ghanaians should look at the two presentations. Okay. We admit reality and we are communicating within the context of the global situation. But the NDC lives in some wonderland where they think that Ghana exists in isolation. Right. And that's what he's going to do. Complain about everything else, but accept no responsibility and suggest no ideas.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Doc, thank you. First of all, a very good morning to our cherished viewers. Doc, what are we discussing? We are discussing the 2023 mid-year budget review statement of the government.
Yes.
Presented to Parliament on behalf of the President by the Finance Minister. And if you read that statement, you get one central theme. The central theme of the mid-year budget review statement presented to Parliament, according to government, is that they have turned the corner and that we are out of the crisis. That is the operative, or if you like, the central theme of the presentation of the Finance Minister. Now that statement, turned the corner, is not the invention of the MPP. It is English language. It is an idiomatic expression. It has a meaning. So instead of my brother Richard going around in circles and making a mockery of himself over this very simple, very basic statement, all we need to do, Doc, is to interrogate the meaning of that phrase and to check the facts about the state of our economy today vis-a-vis where we were last year, to come to the conclusion as to whether or not government has actually turned the corner, whether or not we are out of the crisis. This is a very simple exercise. Doc, what is the meaning of turn the corner? Anybody watching, you can Google it. It means to pass the critical point of a crisis and to begin to improve.
Yes.
It means to recover.
Yes.
To rebound.
Yes.
Right? I wrote some of the synonyms down. To recuperate. To overcome. That is the meaning of that. So, what is the state of the Ghanaian economy today? Per the facts. Do the facts show that we have recovered? We have rebounded? We are seeing a rebound? We are recuperating? We have overcome our challenges? That is the simple question we should be asking. So, let's go to this issue of GDP growth. You've been bantering Richard over. It's a very important economic indicator. In fact, the GDP growth of every economy is the most important indicator of the health of that economy. If an economy is growing, then generally the understanding is that the economy is doing well, because as the economy grows, more employment is created and more monies are put in the pockets of people. That is the general principle. So last year, 2022, Ghana's economy grew by 3.1%. That figure is contained in the minister's own mid-year budget review statement when he gives a report of our macroeconomic performance for the previous fiscal year. He said GDP growth for last year was 3.1%. 2023, what is government projecting to be our GDP growth? Initially, in the 2023 budget presented in November last year, we projected a growth rate of 2.8%. Doc, that 2.8% falls short of the growth rate we achieved last year of 3.1%. But to make matters worse, that projected growth rate of 2.8% has been reviewed downwards to 1.5%. So you did 3.1% GDP growth last year, and you are projecting to do a GDP growth rate of 1.5%. How is that a rebound? How does that amount to turning the corner? Or you don't understand that simple English language? How does that amount to recovering or overcoming the challenge of our stunted economic growth? How does that amount to that? It means that per your own figures, your own facts, the economy will worsen relative to GDP growth. And we are not going to see any rebound in the stunted economic growth we have witnessed in the last few years. These are your own figures, Richard. So why are you confusing yourself? And then they say that, oh, the reason why the finance minister is reviewing the GDP growth rate figures down is because what we projected to get from oil, we are not likely to meet it. Yeah, so the bottom line is that GDP growth is going to be worse than it was last year. So you can't say you are turning the corner or you've turned the corner. In fact, as we speak today, GDP growth is worse for Q1 and Q2, worse than what it was for Q1 and Q2 of the same of 2022.
No, that's not true. It's not true.
What is the GDP growth rate for Q1 and Q2?
Q1
and Q2 first quarter for the first half.
I mean, it's not true. Just carry on. It's not
Maza,
true. It's not true.
For 2022,
you just read the statement.
Overall growth rate was what, 3.1%. It is in the mid-year.
You said Q1, Q2.
Yes. By mid-year last year, the economy was growing by more than 3%. In fact, the decline, the reason why we got to 3.1% at the end of the year was because of what happened at the last part of the year. Today, what K1 and Q2? We are doing less than 2%, 1 point something. Go and check. And that is why the overall growth rate has been reviewed downwards from 2.8, a projection of 2.8 to 1.5. Even if you take non-oil GDP growth, doc, they projected 3%.
Yes.
Last year, they did more than 3%. They did around 3 point something percent. Non-oil GDP growth. And projected 3% for this year. But they are saying that no, they can't achieve that. They will be achieving, they are projecting to achieve 1.5%. How is that an improvement on what we achieved last year? Then they say, oh, it is because of some global factors and all that. So the question is, let's do the very thing Richard is advising us to do this morning. He says we should discuss these economic indicators. We should discuss the state of Ghana's economy within the context of, global trends or regional trends. What is the average GDP growth rate for sub-Saharan Africa for this year, 2023? Doc, it is 3.6%. For the whole of 2023, sub-Saharan Africa, average GDP growth rate is 3.6%. So why are we projecting to do less than half of that average sub-Saharan GDP growth of 1.5? Look, as I speak to you, this same 2023 that we are projecting to grow by 1.5%. Ivory Coast is looking at doing a growth rate of 6.2%. It is in the mid-year budget review statement. Nigeria is projecting to do 3.2%. Mauritius is projecting to do 4.6%. Ethiopia is projecting to do GDP growth rate of 5.3%. Rwanda is projecting to do GDP growth rate of 6.2%. And so on. So, how is our GDP growth rate position, the same as what pertains in the sub-region, where the average is 3.6, or in Africa, where many peers of ours are doing growth rates far higher than even 3%. We are not even doing 2%, we are doing 1.5 as a projection, which we can miss, like we missed our projected growth rates last year. And don't forget that in 2016, under President Mahama, we had only one oil field. And for the greater part of that year, through an act of God, what the lawyers call force majeure, the FPSO in Nkrumah got damaged. The turret bearing got damaged. So for the greater part of that year, we did not produce oil. And because of that, we recorded a negative growth rate for the oil and gas sector for 2016. And that affected the overall growth rate we achieved in 2016. Even though non-oil growth rate was around 6% or around 5%, okay, we ended up dropping in terms of the overall GDP growth to 3.7% because of the negative growth in the oil and gas sector. Why? Because of an act of God, a 40, FPSO. The NPP castigated us, berated President Mahama, called us names. That was the time we had only one oil field that couldn't even produce oil because of an act of God. They said 3.7 growth rate was abysmal. It was a mark of an incompetent government. Today you don't have one oil field. You have 3 oil fields. 3. And you don't have any act of God, any force majeure. You are producing more oil than has ever been produced in the history of Ghana. The international market price of oil, which has even come down in recent time, is far higher than it was in 2016. 3 oil fields. You are projecting to do GDP growth rate of 1.5%, and you are saying that is good. You have turned the corner. You need free education on simple English language. It's either you don't understand what you are saying, or you just don't respect the people. You want to insult our sensibilities. And doc. So what does this mean? What this means is that this year, 2023, we are not going to see any improvement in GDP growth rate. And that means that jobs, employment will suffer, incomes will suffer, Ghanaians will suffer more. And so this is not the time for our finance minister and government to be telling us about turning corners when that is not the case. And then, doc, what is our bane today? Our bane today in terms of the economic bankruptcy we are experiencing is our unsustainable debt. So what is our debt position today? Is it any better? Okay, we know that our public debt has galloped from 120 billion as of December 2016 when John Mahama and the NDC were leaving office to close to 600 billion Ghana cedis as we speak, representing an increase of over 400% in the public debt. And so because of that today, Ghana has become insolvent. We have become bankrupt. We cannot service our debt. And for the first time in more than 3 decades, we have defaulted on our debt obligations. For the first time, we are implementing a draconian debt restructuring program. We are not paying our bilateral creditors, our external creditors, and even Ghanaian bondholders who have lent to us, including poor pensioners. We are not paying them. And some of them are contracting all manner of diseases because of the pain and agony they have been subjected to. Some of them cannot even afford basic medication for themselves because of the mismanagement, the excessive borrowing, the reckless expenditures of the Bawumia-led economic management team. And then you come and tell us that we are out of the woods, we have turned the corner, we have recovered. Meanwhile, as we speak, the draconian debt exchange program continues unabated. Are more, creditors not being added to that debt restructuring program? Cocoa bills have just been added. Government is even seeking to add pension funds. So how have we seen any improvement in our debt position? You know something? Anybody listening to me should check Appendix 2A of the mid-year budget review statement of this government. This 2023 mid-year budget review we are discussing. Government in 2023 projected not to borrow on the domestic market. They said they were going to borrow 0 on the domestic market. Doc, rightly so. Because when you find yourself in an unsustainable debt position, you can't service your debt. You are locked out of the international capital market. Nobody wants to lend to you. And you decide to go through debt restructuring. What you're doing is that you are depriving your creditors of their investments. Okay? And so the savings you make out of that debt restructuring program are supposed to be invested into the payments of the debts. No sensible government compounds its debts in the middle of a debt restructuring program. If you do that, you will end up imposing another debt restructuring program, like it happened to Jamaica. So what we're supposed to do is that the gains we are now making from the debt restructuring program, which actually are the hard-earned investors of bondholders, would have been invested prudently, in a prudent manner. But what are we seeing? Instead of living up to their own projection of borrowing zero on the domestic market, you know that for the first half of this year alone, this government has borrowed a whopping 5.5 billion Ghana cedis without parliamentary approval. Because they told Parliament in the 2023 budget that they were going to borrow nothing on the domestic market. On the T-bill market alone, 5.5 billion cedis. And they are projecting to borrow in this mid-year budget review another 41.3 billion cedis. In total, 46.8 billion domestic borrowing this year. You know what that will do? Apart from the fact that that will increase the already high public debts, what that will do is that it's going to crowd out the private sector. It's going to restrict access to credit, which is already low in the economy. And it is going to increase the already high lending rates in the country. Already you know that T-bill rates have increased from 14% to 27%. You understand? As I speak to you, lending rate is 36%. Ghana Commercial Bank, go and check. And you are going to do this excessive domestic borrowing. And you say you have turned the corner. How have we turned the corner relative to our own sustainable public debt? Have we returned to the international capital market? Have we now become debt sustainable? What are you talking about? Have we stopped the debt restructuring? Are you paying bondholders? Are you paying your external creditors? Have we seen any improvement at all in the figures? The answer is no, no, no. Then look at even expenditure. One of the major causes of the crisis we have on our hands. There is discretionary expenditure and there is non-discretionary. Non-discretionary means government is bound. We can't do anything about it. But even a larger component of that non-discretionary expenditure, which is debt servicing, now because of our default, we are not paying. You understand? And that has helped to bring down that non-discretionary expenditure, allocation or projection. However, the discretionary that government can do something about, key among which is goods and services, consumption, chop. Monies that government officials, government agencies and departments spend in their offices for the running of government services. That government can do something about. And in fact told us that they will do something about. They are going to cut that. So that we do what they call burden sharing. You know what we are having now? Burden shifting. Because whilst they are depriving bondholders of their investments, they are killing some in the process. You know that they have exceeded their goods and service budget for the first year of 2023. They projected to do goods and services expenditure 4.1 billion. Check Appendix 2A. What have they done as at mid-year? 4.7 billion. An increase of 600 billion cedis. A million cedis. Million. And 600 million is 6 trillion old Ghana cedis.
Exaggeration.
What is exaggeration?
Carry on.
What is exaggeration? Are you a bondholder?
Carry on.
What a bondholder?
Carry on.
You will not be talking like this. You deprive pensioners of their monies. And instead of you to spend those monies on the payment of your debts, you are spending it on goods and services consumption. The same recklessness that has collapsed the economy. And you are here saying we have turned the corner. Exaggeration. You people have no respect at all for the people of this country. Then you come to inflation. Yes, by end of 2022, the rate of inflation was 54.1%. As of June, 42.5%. Clearly, you can see a relative stability. Okay. However, the most important thing when you are analyzing inflation is the trajectory of that inflation. Whether it is on an upward trend or it is on a downward trend. You understand? So if, for example, inflation has come down and inflation currently is on a downward trend, then at least on the issue of inflation, the finance minister would be right to say that we have turned the corner because we have seen the rates of inflation improve. But Doc, what are the facts? Inflation has been on an upward trend for the last 3 months. In April, it was 41.1%. In May, 42.2%. In June, 42.5%. And the Ghana Statistical Service, in fact, the World Bank is projecting that it's going to go up again. You understand? And why won't inflation go up when government is over borrowing excessively in the domestic market? Because when lending rates go up, inflation will go up. So we are likely to return to hyper levels of inflation again. And why are we seeing this high inflation? Master, in any country where you have over 40% of inflation, that country is sunk. What it means is that the purchasing power of the ordinary people of that country is being eaten away at a very alarming rate. What 100 Ghana cedis could do 2 years ago, it cannot do even a quarter of that today because of the rate of inflation.
PENDREAM TV now, so far so good. Say open online portal e Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.